Former UGA great has a very funny memory from a classic moment in the Dogs' past. That's all on the way next as part of our Classic Moment, presented by Classic City Lager. Hey Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is the Classic Moment presented by Classic City Lager. And you're probably aware that 2021 marks the 20th anniversary of Georgia's Hobnail Boot win against Tennessee. Of course, the game known as the Hobnail Boot because of the classic call by former Georgia play-by-play broadcaster, the legendary Larry Munson. It was a pivotal win in the first season of Georgia coach Mark Richt. Just the year prior, Georgia had beaten Tennessee for the first time in 9 tries, and so to go on the road, win in Knoxville was clearly a big deal. We've covered this before in a previous edition of our Classic Moment presented by Classic City Lager, but it also came back again here this week as the Dogs get ready to take on Tennessee. In fact, the former Georgia great David Pollack, who was just a freshman at the time of that game in 2001, actually thought back on the Hobnail Boot game during an ESPN podcast here this week. And his own look back at this is actually pretty funny. Pollack was not yet then the great player he'd become there at UGA. When he looked across the field at Tennessee, David said he wasn't even really quite sure how well he fit into the SEC. This is funny when you think about the player that Pollack would eventually become. Here are his thoughts from an ESPN podcast earlier this week.
I was a freshman, and by the way, you talk about feeling like you don't belong in the SEC. We go to Knoxville. I'm a freshman playing defensive tackle. And I look on the other side and I see John Henderson and Albert Hainsworth. And I'm like, am I in the right sport? I'm like, one of these are not like the other. I mean, literally, I remember as a freshman, I was like, yeah, I don't know if this is a good thing or not. Those guys don't look like me. But what a crazy, that was a crazy memory. It's a crazy call by Munson.
Obviously, it's cool at the end there to hear Pollack referencing the great call by Larry Munson. And it's also, as I said, funny to think about David Pollack not quite sure how he fit into the SEC, given the fact he would go on to be one of the great players in history on the SEC on that side of the ball. I also this week had a chance to catch up with one of David's former teammates, John Stinchcomb, when I had a chance to ask him if John's own memories of that win against Tennessee in 2001 were similar to what Pollack had to say. And John Stinchcomb said, yeah, there was a lot of respect for that Tennessee team way back then, the one that Georgia would earn a great victory against. Here's John Stinchcomb.
Well, back in the day, I think Tennessee had arguably the best line in the SEC, which is saying something. I mean, your tackles were John Henderson and Albert Hainsworth, 2 big old monsters. Bernard Moore used to rotate in. They had a defensive end hand. I mean, they were pretty well stacked. And that was after Will Overstreet had moved on and gone to the NFL. So I remember being in the huddle and, Greeny would look over and you see these 2 mountains in the middle with John Henderson and Albert Hainsworth. And you just knew that you're going to have your day's work cut out for you. But really one of the most talented college defensive fronts that we faced. And they certainly set the bar high for the rest of the conference.
It goes without saying that the Tennessee team that Georgia will play this Saturday nowhere near as talented as Tennessee was back at the turn of the century. But when you hear Stinchcomb and Pollack describing that Vols team the way they did, it's another way of understanding about just how crucial of a win that was for Georgia in 2001. The following year in 2002, Georgia won the SEC for the first time in 20 years. It was clearly a great start to the Mark Richt era and a great chance to look back on 20 years ago, the Hobnail Boot win for the Dogs at Tennessee. It's part of our Classic Moment presented by Classic City Lager. And of course, when it comes to Classic City Lager, boy, they serve it up well each and every time. Whether you're at a tailgate or hanging out with friends on the back porch, the back patio, whatever you're doing this time of year, Classic City Lager goes great with that. It's from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. It's a lager-style beer, which means it's lighter in color, no sacrifice in flavor. A craft-style lager. Great care taken to make sure each and every drop tastes delicious. That's what Classic City Lager is famous for. So many of you know that, and you're stocking up on it each and every week. The rest of you, maybe you're trying it for the very first time. Wherever you're doing your shopping, available 6 and 12-pack cans all year long. Classic City Lager. Make sure you try some today. We appreciate you being here for our Classic Moment presented by Classic City Lager. Enjoy the game here this weekend, and we'll see you back here next week at this same time for the Classic Moment presented by Classic City Lager.